Body language. My God, no amount of PR spin is going to deal with that. He just doesn't seem to give a damn.
The cameras were meant to capture another polished moment, something that would fit neatly into the image built around Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, but what they captured instead immediately stood out to viewers. The moment Harry stepped out of the black SUV in New York, some observers felt a noticeable shift in his demeanor, with his expression appearing tense, his posture more rigid than expected, and his body language interpreted by many as controlled but strained. Under the constant flashes of cameras, Meghan maintained a composed presence, moving through the moment with a steady smile and confident posture. Yet for some watching, the contrast between their expressions became a focal point of discussion. It created a sense, at least for viewers analyzing the footage, that something felt different beneath the surface.
Harry usually introduces his wife, not last night. And my God, the look she shot at. It's like, you just wait till we're back at home.
As if the atmosphere between them carried more tension than usual. Then the situation appeared to escalate. A voice from the crowd broke through the noise, drawing immediate attention. And in that instant, the focus shifted completely. Harry's reaction, brief but noticeable, was quickly picked up by cameras, with viewers pointing to the way he turned toward the sound, interpreting that split second as a flash of emotion that added even more intensity to an already highly scrutinized moment. Before he turned away, there was a brief moment of contact that quickly became a focal point for viewers, as Prince Harry appeared to guide Meghan Markle forward with urgency, a movement that some interpreted as hurried rather than relaxed. His lips moved as if he was saying something, but with the noise of cameras and voices around them, nothing could be heard, which only added to the sense of tension people felt while watching the footage. The atmosphere, as described by many observers, seemed charged, with constant flashes, reporters calling out, and a moment that no longer felt like a polished public appearance. From that point on, the tone shifted. What might normally be seen as a composed public moment was instead described by some as raw and less controlled, with interpretations suggesting that both appeared focused on moving through the situation rather than engaging with it.
I just spoke to somebody that said their palace sources say perhaps the king would plan to meet with Prince Harry at the beginning of 2026. Meghan Markle has no desire to return to the UK because she knows how simply loathed she is there.
For those analyzing the footage, the expressions and body language became the center of attention, with some viewers suggesting that the smiles seen on camera felt more restrained than natural. And as they continued walking together, side by side, the contrast in how the moment was perceived by the public only grew, with many observers noting a sense of distance in the interaction, even as they remained physically close in front of the cameras. It was meant to look like glamour, but to some observers, it felt more like tension, unfolding quietly under the lights. Every flash of the camera seemed to raise the same question. What changed between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle that made this moment feel so different from what people expected? Before we go further, make sure to hit subscribe and like the video because it helps bring more breakdowns like this your way. Now back to the moment. New York City was alive that night, sirens echoing in the distance, cameras flashing non-stop, and expectations running high. This was supposed to be a major return, a moment where the Duke and Duchess of Sussex stepped back into the spotlight with confidence after time away from constant headlines. The venue itself was set up to reflect that, glowing with polished lighting and carefully staged presentation, everything aligned for what many expected to be a strong reappearance. But according to people who were there and those analyzing the footage afterward, the atmosphere felt different almost immediately. Despite the visual setup, there was a sense among some observers that something did not fully align with the moment, creating a contrast between what was being presented and how it was being perceived. Event staff reportedly noticed unusual tension even before Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped out of the SUV, with some accounts describing the atmosphere inside the vehicle as quiet and strained.
And then you see her naked feet crisscrossed in front of her, like the world is at my feet. Ha ha ha, this is so fun. This is where my children's grandmother died. Good times. Let me put this online.
The New York Times are finally realizing actually his wife might be a disaster tourist, but he is a disaster when it comes to charity, especially African charity, because he doesn't actually give a damn. For years and years and years, he used Africa because it was good for his PR.
One insider described Harry's expression as unusually serious, as if he was preparing himself for the moment ahead, while Meghan was said to be focused on adjusting her appearance, looking into the window reflection, and remaining composed. By the time the car door opened, cameras were already locked in from every angle, with photographers and media waiting for what was expected to be a perfectly timed entrance. The event had been set up for a smooth, elegant arrival, one coordinated walk, one unified moment. but according to those present, something felt different from the very beginning. As soon as they stepped out, observers noted that Harry moved ahead first, slightly breaking the expected rhythm, with his attention directed more toward the ground than the surrounding crowd. For some watching, that shift stood out, because the usual composed and synchronized appearance seemed replaced by something more tense and less coordinated. And as people began comparing this moment to past appearances, it added to a growing sense among observers that this was not the first time subtle tension had been noticed in public settings. Just weeks earlier, during what was described as a private dinner, there were reports of a brief moment that some witnesses later interpreted as telling, when Meghan Markle appeared to reach for Prince Harry's hand, and the interaction that followed was described by onlookers as reserved rather than warm. According to one account, a short exchange followed, quiet and quick, but noticeable enough that it became part of the broader speculation that began circulating afterward. From that point,
They would tell you it's for protecting children online, but then why is Meghan Markle at a Balenciaga show accused of predatory behavior in the form of children's images?
The simmering tension between the duplicitous Duke and his facelift-enhanced wife. Here's the red carpet arrival.
Hey, Harris, when you go upstairs.
conversations started building in certain circles, with some observers suggesting that the dynamic between them might not be as seamless as it once appeared publicly. PR commentators and body language analysts have since weighed in, with many of them pointing out that what people noticed in New York may not have been an isolated moment, but part of a pattern that had been developing over time. In that sense, the event itself was not just seen as an awkward public interaction, but by some as a rare glimpse into something deeper that is usually kept out of view. And yet, despite all the analysis and speculation, there is still no clear agreement on what may have caused that shift, which is exactly why the conversation continues to grow, with different interpretations shaping how the situation is being understood. Some say it is the weight of fame, others point to the pressure that comes with royal life, but according to one insider account, the shift people are now talking about may have started much earlier, not in the United States, but during a high-profile appearance in Paris. To the public, that moment looked like a clear success, with Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepping out together in a way that was widely presented as confident and composed. Cameras flashed continuously as they arrived.
They really hate each other now, and they cannot hide it anymore.
And the scene was framed as a major return to the spotlight, with coverage describing it as a comeback moment that had been anticipated for weeks. Everything about the appearance appeared carefully arranged, from wardrobe choices to timing, creating the image of a strong and unified presence. Meghan's look drew particular attention, with her outfit and movements described as deliberate and polished, while Harry followed closely, engaging with the crowd and maintaining a formal presence. The overall picture was meant to reflect confidence and control, reinforcing the idea of a couple stepping forward with renewed visibility. But according to some observers, that impression did not last long. As the cameras intensified and attention increased, subtle details in their expressions and body language began to stand out, leading some to suggest that beneath the carefully presented image, there were signs of tension that quickly became noticeable. Even people watching online began pointing out the contrast. For some viewers, Prince Harry's expression did not seem to match Meghan Markle's, with her maintaining a composed and steady smile, while his demeanor appeared more reserved and focused. Rather than projecting visible excitement, some interpreted his body language as controlled, almost as if he was concentrating on moving through the moment under pressure. There was a brief pause captured on camera, subtle but noticeable to those analyzing the footage.
Our children, Archie and Lily, are just 6 and 4 years old. Luckily, still too young for social media, but we know that day is coming.
Now, Meghan, the actress, of course, had to stick to the script. And so we had the hilarious, she's trying to talk about the need to protect children from social media, even though she's pimping out her own children wherever she can, causing these tensions.
Which added to the sense that something beneath the surface felt tense. Then, in the middle of the noise and flashing cameras, a voice from the crowd cut through the moment, drawing immediate attention. That interruption shifted the focus instantly. Cameras captured their reactions in real time, with viewers later pointing to small changes in expression, a slight break in rhythm, a tightened jaw, a quick glance toward the source of the sound. For some, it did not read as surprise alone. but as a moment that added to the growing perception of tension that people had already begun discussing, which is why that clip has continued to circulate and be analyzed across different platforms. That is when he reached toward her arm.
When he's on the BBC saying that it's not safe enough for my family in the UK, but it's safe enough for Meghan to be alone in Paris, literally engaging with the paparazzi you say killed your mother.
A moment that quickly became a focal point in the footage, with some observers interpreting it not as a casual gesture, but as something more urgent, a signal to move forward without delay. According to accounts from people nearby, what cameras captured as simple guidance was, to them, more deliberate, which is why that brief interaction has been replayed and discussed so widely. From that point on, the tone of the evening appeared to shift for those watching closely. While Prince Harry and Meghan Markle continued moving through the event, maintaining smiles, waves, and the expected public composure, some viewers felt that the dynamic between them seemed more controlled than relaxed. To the general audience, it still looked like a polished appearance. But for those analyzing every detail, it was interpreted differently, with some describing a sense of distance or restraint beneath the surface. And that contrast is exactly what turned the moment into a larger talking point. Because what was meant to be seen as a confident return to the spotlight ended up, for some observers, feeling like a moment where subtle shifts became visible, adding to the broader narrative that continues to be debated. The beginning of something that, to some observers, looked like it might be quietly unraveling, because while everything on the surface appeared polished and picture-perfect, the replays started telling a different story. When the New York footage was slowed down and examined more closely, many viewers began focusing on subtle details, the kind that are easy to miss in real time but stand out when analyzed frame by frame. According to those interpretations, the distance people were talking about was not physical. It was reflected in small movements and brief pauses, in what was not said as much as what was visible. Prince Harry's posture, for example, was described by some as reserved, with his hands at his side and minimal gestures, while Meghan Markle maintained a composed presence, with a steady expression directed toward the cameras. Some viewers pointed to moments where his reactions appeared delayed or controlled, interpreting it as a sign of pressure, while others focused on the timing of her expressions.
I know that this is a place that my husband hates because it's where he lost his mom. I'm not going to go there.
It doesn't work for you to shoulders back, breasts out, headlights going, and try to look as bitchy as possible.
Suggesting that certain reactions felt slightly out of sync. Body language commentators weighed in as well, offering their own perspectives, with one describing Harry's stance as more withdrawn, while another suggested that Meghan's responses appeared carefully timed rather than spontaneous. Of course, these interpretations are subjective, but taken together, they created a narrative for some viewers that this was less about a natural interaction and more about coordination under pressure, which is why the moment continues to be analyzed and debated. And according to some accounts, this was not the first time people thought they noticed those same signs. Just weeks earlier, during a high-profile charity event linked to Kevin Costner, observers described moments that, in their view, reflected a similar dynamic. Witnesses claimed that when Meghan Markle took the lead in conversations, Prince Harry appeared more reserved, with his expression becoming more distant, a detail that some later connected to what was seen again in New York. Behind the scenes, additional claims began circulating, with some insiders describing tense moments during preparations, including reports of disagreements over styling decisions and brief exchanges that were interpreted as firm and businesslike. One account mentioned a conversation that ended abruptly, followed by a noticeable silence, which people nearby described as significant. According to those same reports, Harry remained largely quiet during these moments, which some interpreted as a shift in how he responded under pressure. These accounts, while unverified, have contributed to a broader narrative among observers who believe that the dynamic being discussed may have been developing over time. At the same time, it is important to recognize that these descriptions are based on second-hand reports and interpretations, which is why the situation continues to be debated rather than clearly defined.
Yeah, but
See her face. You get him, mate. But on stage, when they knew everyone was filming on their mobile phones and taking pictures, it got even worse. Harry's speech was so lackluster, Tash. As you say, I think he's furious about what went on in Paris, but they couldn't cancel this event.
He did not react outwardly in a noticeable way, and that quiet distance is exactly what many viewers focused on once the red carpet footage began circulating. Side-by-side photos quickly spread across social media, with some pointing out how Prince Harry appeared slightly turned away, his expression more neutral, while Meghan Markle maintained a composed, camera-ready presence. Official captions described the moment as polished and romantic, but for many who had followed their story over time, the interpretation was different. Instead of closeness, some viewers described what they saw as restraint. By the end of the night, even people involved in the event were said to be discussing the atmosphere, with one account describing it as less about natural chemistry and more about maintaining a public image. From that perspective, the smiles and poses were still there, but the energy between them felt changed to those watching closely. And that is where the bigger question starts to form. What shifted in a partnership that was once widely seen as strong and unified? Because to understand why that moment in New York stood out so much, many observers point back further, not just to recent appearances, but to earlier events, including a high-profile moment in Paris, where some believe the first signs of this shift began to appear.
Maybe he is still very upset over her stunt over in Paris. I can't imagine that that didn't go unnoticed by him.
You completely see that she is shaken by this.
That trip was meant to be a standout moment, a return to the spotlight filled with high fashion, front-row appearances, and constant media attention, with every detail pointing toward success for Meghan Markle. To the public, it looked exactly like that. But according to people who were there, the atmosphere felt different up close. Some described seeing two individuals moving through the same space, physically near each other, but appearing emotionally distant in their interactions. Prince Harry was noted by some observers as maintaining a more reserved presence, with his focus directed ahead, while Meghan engaged with designers and cameras with a composed, polished expression that matched the setting. From a distance, it looked like glamour. But for those paying close attention, the tone was described differently. Then came a moment that drew significant attention. Footage showed Meghan walking through the Pont de l'Alma tunnel, a location long associated with Princess Diana. That connection carried a strong emotional weight, which is why the scene resonated so deeply with viewers. In the footage, Meghan appeared composed, with a measured expression, her scarf wrapped closely as she moved through the space, creating an image that some interpreted as symbolic, while others saw it as carefully constructed. And according to insiders, it was around moments like this that the sense of tension began to grow more noticeable, adding another layer to the ongoing discussion about how these appearances were being experienced behind the scenes. Her expression appeared calm and composed in the clip, but many viewers felt it carried a deliberate tone. And once that footage began circulating online, it immediately sparked strong reactions. At the same time, according to people described as close to the situation, the response behind the scenes was said to be far more intense, particularly for Prince Harry, who has long spoken about the personal significance of locations connected to Princess Diana. For him, the Pont de l'Alma tunnel is not just a public landmark, but a place tied to a deeply emotional history, which is why the moment carried a different weight depending on perspective. From another point of view, Meghan Markle's appearance there was interpreted by some as symbolic, reflecting on legacy and history in a broader sense. But according to insider accounts, that difference in interpretation may have led to a difficult conversation afterward. These reports describe the moment not as a public confrontation, but as a more private and emotional exchange, where the significance of the location and its connection to Harry's past became a central point. As with many of the claims surrounding these events, details remain unconfirmed. However, the way the moment has been interpreted by different observers continues to shape the broader narrative, adding another layer to how these appearances are being viewed and discussed. Meghan was said to have framed the moment as artistic and reflective, describing it as something intended to be thoughtful and respectful, but according to those accounts,
I know my latest money-making scheme is going to be cosplaying the final night that Princess Diana died. It's truly sick.
the situation may have affected Prince Harry differently, given the personal meaning tied to that place and its connection to Princess Diana. From that point on, some observers believe a shift became more noticeable in how the couple appeared together publicly. According to that interpretation, the dynamic began to feel more controlled, with fewer spontaneous moments and more carefully managed appearances. What had once been seen as natural affection started to be described by some critics as more structured, with gestures, smiles, and interactions appearing increasingly aligned with the demands of public attention. That does not mean the reality behind those moments is fully known, but it does explain why the perception has changed for many viewers. By the time the New York appearance took place, those earlier impressions shaped how people interpreted what they saw, with some describing the tone as more restrained and the interactions as more deliberate than relaxed. For those following the story closely, the shift was not defined by a single dramatic moment, but by a gradual change in how the relationship appeared in public settings. And that is what continues to draw attention because it raises a broader question. Not just about what happened, but about how perception evolves over time when every moment is observed, analyzed, and interpreted through different perspectives. And what some observers believe may have started in Paris did not end in New York. it simply became more visible, harder to overlook, and more open to interpretation, because every story has a rhythm, and when something shifts, even slightly, that rhythm can feel different to those paying close attention. For viewers analyzing Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, that difference has been described as subtle but persistent, showing up in pauses between interactions, in brief exchanges caught off camera, and in moments of silence that seem to carry more weight than the words themselves. To many, what once felt like a seamless public narrative now appears more layered.
But I have to just say, anyone who has doubted me over the past decade about this evil woman now needs to eat some humble pie, because this video designed to mentally torture her husband.
She was the villain
How was she dangerous?
because of the need for her to rehabilitate her image.
With contrasting impressions forming at the same time. On one level, the presentation remains polished, structured, and carefully managed, reflecting the demands of global attention and constant visibility. But on another level, some viewers interpret a quieter undertone, something less defined, yet noticeable enough to keep drawing attention. It is not a single moment that defines that perception. It is the accumulation of small details, the way interactions unfold, the timing of expressions, the pauses that linger just a little longer than expected. And that is what keeps people watching closely, not necessarily looking for a dramatic break, but trying to understand what those subtle shifts might mean over time. Because in a story that continues to evolve under constant scrutiny, it is often the quiet moments that leave the strongest impression. What some observers are picking up on now is not something loud or dramatic, but something much quieter, almost subtle, the kind of shift that is difficult to define but easy to feel when moments are replayed and examined closely. It is being described as a change that shows up in the smallest details, in pauses that linger, in conversations that feel shorter than expected, and in the way interactions between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle are interpreted by those watching. According to some insider accounts, what stands out is not conflict, but control. A sense that every movement, every word, and every reaction is measured, carefully timed, and shaped by the pressure of constant public attention. For viewers analyzing these moments, that creates an impression of coordination without spontaneity, where expressions appear steady, but at times slightly restrained. Harry's tone in public settings has been described by some as more deliberate and controlled, while Meghan's delivery is often seen as consistent and composed, yet occasionally interpreted as carrying underlying tension. Together, these interpretations have led to a broader narrative among critics, one that suggests a dynamic defined less by unpredictability and more by precision, where everything appears aligned on the surface but may feel out of sync beneath it. And the more closely people follow their story, the more those small details become the focus. Because it is in those pauses, those glances, and those carefully chosen words that many believe something deeper is being reflected, even if it is never directly said. What many observers keep returning to is not what is being said, but what is not. Because in moments like these, silence can feel just as revealing as any statement. For some viewers, that silence seems to carry more weight than the carefully chosen words, creating an impression that goes beyond the polished image presented in public. There was a time when the connection between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle was widely seen as natural and unfiltered, especially in those earlier appearances where their interactions appeared effortless. But according to how the story is now being interpreted, something may have shifted over time as the pressure of constant attention and the expectations surrounding their public roles increased. For some observers, the changes are subtle, shorter exchanges, less visible interaction, a different tone in how moments are carried out in front of the cameras. From that perspective, what began as a shared stance against external pressures is now being viewed by some critics as a more internal dynamic, shaped by the demands of maintaining a public image. Every story eventually reaches a turning point. Some are defined by dramatic moments, others by quiet transitions. And in this case, what people are watching closely is not a single event, but a gradual evolution in how the relationship is perceived. Because if there is one thing that continues to draw attention, it is not just what is happening now, but what it might suggest about what comes next, leaving a question that lingers long after the cameras stop. Was there ever a connection strong enough to withstand the level of attention that surrounded it? Because for some observers, once affection begins to look like performance and loyalty starts to be interpreted as part of a broader strategy, the narrative does not collapse all at once. It changes gradually, frame by frame, moment by moment, expression by expression. And somewhere in that space, between what is shown publicly and what is felt beneath it, many believe there is a layer that remains unspoken, yet difficult to ignore. For those analyzing the New York appearance, it was not just another event. It became, in their view, a reflection of a deeper pattern, one that some critics associate with Meghan Markle, describing a shift from connection to control, from From spontaneity to careful presentation, that interpretation is not universally accepted. But it is one that continues to circulate. And for those who follow the story closely, the idea being discussed is that this dynamic may not be entirely new. Because long before the royal titles, before the global spotlight, there were earlier chapters, earlier relationships, and earlier moments that some now revisit in an attempt to understand what they believe they are seeing today. Trevor Engelson, Meghan's first husband, was part of her life long before the global spotlight, back when her story had not yet become a subject of worldwide attention. Their relationship ended years before her royal chapter began, and while there has been ongoing curiosity about that period, there are no verified public statements from him directly addressing the kind of claims often circulated online. But that has not stopped people from revisiting the past. For some observers, earlier chapters are now being looked at again, not as confirmed explanations, but as pieces that might help them interpret what they believe they are seeing today. And that is where the narrative becomes more layered, because the discussion is no longer just about one moment in New York or one appearance under the spotlight. It is about patterns people think they recognize, whether those interpretations are accurate or not. For those watching closely, the focus shifts back to Prince Harry, his silence, his expressions, and what they might suggest. Some see it as restraint, others see something deeper, but the truth is, much of it remains open to interpretation. So now it comes down to you. Do you believe there is a repeating pattern behind these moments, or do you think there is more to the story that has not been seen yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who has been following the story. This is Palace Loop, where the story goes deeper than the headlines.